Shalom. Welcome again to Secrets of Meaning, the podcast arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address. We thank you for your time and for joining us today in what I know will be a very, very interesting and relevant and timely conversation as we welcome my friend and my colleague, Rabbi Dayle Friedman from growingolder.net. For those of you who perhaps are not familiar with Rabbi Friedman's work, it's easy to say that she is a nationally known speaker, teacher, spiritual guide dealing with a specialty in aging, with a specific rabbinic specialty right now in dealing with individuals and families with the challenge of Alzheimer's and dementia. No doubt many of you have read some of her books, articles, or perhaps have connected with her in one of her Scholar in Residence weekends or speeches. So Dayle, welcome to today's edition again, and I hope you're okay. And so let's get right into it, because the growth in our community nationally, but especially in the Jewish community of Alzheimer's and dementia is overwhelming social service agencies. It's going to continue to overwhelm synagogues and Jewish family services. So let me just get to some of the basics. Your rabbinate right now deals a lot with support for individuals and families. Talk to me about what you do, how you do it, and if somebody really wants to connect with you, how would they do that?
Thank you so much, Rabbi Address. I've been trotting in the pathways of dementia for a really long time. I started working with people living with dementia in my 20s. And I always had the sense that there was a more complex reality there than what people from the outside sometimes saw and characterized. So I started my career as a nursing home chaplain, really walking alongside people living with dementia. And at this point in my work, I work with family caregivers, family members who are accompanying dear ones in the journey of dementia, and not so much directly with people with dementia, but I'm a family caregiver and I'm accompanying my mother as she is on the dementia journey. She's 92 and she recently moved 2,000 miles across the country to a memory care community near me. So I have the great blessing of being with her on much more of a day-to-day basis on this journey. My website, as you mentioned, is www.growingolder.net. And that's one way that people can connect to resources about this. But I'm really thinking about not so much what we do when somebody we love or when we have dementia, but given that this is a reality that we're all going to face, how do we prepare for it? How might we take a different stance toward dementia?
So, you mentioned that you're walking this walk. So let me, and the preparation for that. But if you don't mind, and if you do, let me know. That's cool. When you did this, and your mom was in another all the way out west. But we're in Philly, the Philadelphia area. Your mom was in the Mountain Time Zone. Did you find it different teaching about it and then actually having to live it? And how did you handle it?
Oh my goodness, yes. Of course, there's nothing more humbling than dealing with something in your own life and your own complicated family than teaching others about it and counseling others. That just the naughtiness, KNOT, of the dilemmas of, how to decide when is it time to make a move. And just the costs for my mom of ripping her out of her familiar environment. And then on the other hand, since she's moved, I have to say, realizing how long we waited and how much she could have used more support from family. She had really good paid caregivers who loved her, but um, there were things that a daughter can do that somebody else can't do.
Right.
And the fact that we can have
Absolutely.
her over for Shabbat almost every Friday night, that there's no substitute for that kind of family connection. So just the complexity of these issues. And honestly, you would think that I would know a lot about how big a deal it is to care for somebody with dementia. I am so humbled by the responsibility that I have now as my mother's primary caregiver. It's just immense. I can't get over it.
It is I remember from over a decade ago with my mom. So, and it really is, there's the morning prayer, as many of the people who will be watching or listening to this may recall the Eila Devarim She'ein Lahem Shiur prayer. And the obligations or the things that we are obligated to do. And one of them obviously is accompanying people in this journey. You mentioned before, and just a second ago, that one of the focuses now of your rabbinate is in the beginning stages, the preparation stages, and we were talking before we went on with this idea of reframing and defanging, which is a great image. What do you mean by that?
Our culture holds dementia as a tragedy. And we are filled with images of dementia as non-being, as the end of personhood. A fantastic, fantastic book on this subject is called On Vanishing by Lynn Castile Harper, who's a minister and a chaplain. And she talks about the imagination in our culture that a person with dementia is like vapor, as in Ecclesiastes, vanity, vanity, all is everything. It's just, we're just breath, that we're not a person, we're not a soul, we're not anything when we have dementia. And, it's very easy to see how people with dementia are treated like non-persons. Now, we know that people in our society are desperately afraid of getting dementia. Research studies have found that people are more afraid of dementia than cancer. Because I've had the great blessing of living in dementia land along with people with dementia for many, 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 many years of my life, I know that the picture is much more complicated than that. I know that it isn't that you cease to be. Certain parts of your intellect might cease to be, but your soul doesn't cease to be. Your emotions don't cease to be. So I'm interested in making the picture of dementia more complex. I'm interested in unhooking ourselves from the tragedy narrative, as some people call it, and trying to develop a more complex picture. So that's on the one hand. And of course, the fact that we isolate people with dementia and we put them away in institutions and far from the madding crowd, and they're not in our synagogues and they're not in our cultural institutions, allows for these stereotypes and very scary images to happen. Whereas, the more that we encounter a person with dementia, we find that it's much more complex. So that's the first part. The second part is that I've been really interested in given that if I live long enough, I'm going to have dementia. My father had Parkinson's dementia. My mother has Alzheimer's disease. I hope I live a really long time. And guess what? It doesn't look like anybody's curing dementia anytime soon. So most likely I'm going to live with dementia. So I'm interested in how can I prepare for that unwanted, uninvited, unordered reality. And that's really what I've been thinking a lot about lately is what could we do while we don't have dementia, while we don't have mild cognitive impairment, just while we're living our lives, how can we prepare ourselves to face a reality that we wouldn't have chosen? And of course, that's a great spiritual practice anytime because life throws us unwelcome realities all the time. So I've seized upon a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, believe it or not, 17th century Hasidic founder of Hasidism, who had a teaching, you might even call it a technology, for facing unwelcome experiences. Now, he didn't start out that way. What he started out with is, what do you do when you're praying, when you're davening, and you start thinking about your grocery list or other, even maybe more inappropriate things? He called those machshavot zarot, strange thoughts, foreign thoughts. And he developed this 3-part practice for how you deal with those. And then he said, you know what? This really applies to any experience of brokenness, any experience that's unwelcome. So here's the 3 parts, if I can share them. I'm finding them really juicy to work with. So the first thing is, I'm facing a reality that I don't want to face. Give you an example that will be, I think, easy to relate to for all of us. It's March 2020. My husband and I are supposed to go to a wedding in Tucson, Arizona. And then after that, I'm supposed to go to a conference in Santa Fe. And after that, I have another trip. And each one of these events approaches and it becomes apparent we're not going anywhere. And each time one of these disappointments pops up, I find myself saying, no, I have to go. This can't be true. This is wrong. Okay, that's an example of an unwelcome experience. And I call my response classic toddler stance, which I think we can all locate somewhere in our. So what do? The Baal Shem Tov says the first thing you have to do is surrender, Dorothy. The word he uses is hachna'ah, which means submit, or I like to say yield. Yield to what is. It is amazing what happens when we let go of resistance to what is. And it turns out that resistance to what is really costly. In the case of dementia, not acknowledging the possibility of dementia prevents us from planning. Not facing dementia when it's coming on prevents us from communicating our wishes to the people who might be taking care of us. And of course, we see this all the time with aging. Not acknowledging that I'm going to be frail and my needs will change prevents me from making plans to have a living situation which will be apt for me. So Baal Shem Tov says, nope, yield to what is. And in Hebrew, we say, Zeh ma sheyesh. This is what we've got. This is what's here. So dropping the resistance, just really being with what is. And that's hard, but it's also powerful. The second dimension of the Baal Shem Tov's response is called Havdalah. Now, we know the word Havdalah from the ceremony to end Shabbat, that make a distinction between Shabbat and the week. He uses Havdalah as kind of making a discernment. Okay, so Zeh ma sheyesh, this is what we have. Well, what's here? If I walk into a dark room, initially all I see is darkness. It's undifferentiated. But if I stay there for a few minutes and my eyes get adjusted, I might start to notice mass and space. I might notice darker darkness and lighter shadows. I might even see a light under the door. And that discerning, really, where am I? What is this space? Allows me to be able to learn, how am I going to move in this space? What are my possibilities and what are not my possibilities? What is for me in this space? So that's the second part. And the third part he calls hamtaka, which means sweetening. And something about the yielding and the discerning allows for the possibility that this might be a lot more complex than I thought it was, and I may be able to find unexpected sweetness. And I'll give you an example of that. I worked as a chaplain in a high-rise building that was what was called a naturally occurring retirement community. People had moved there in their 60s and they'd aged in place. And in that building was a very, very, very frail woman with dementia in her 90s who had a daughter who came in every other weekend from far away and took care of her mom. The rest of the time she had paid caregivers, but every other weekend the daughter came in and the mom was not communicative. And the daughter spent all weekend just attending to her mother's, most basic needs. I talked to this daughter and she told me that she and her mother had a terrible relationship. It was conflictual. It was filled with resentment and hurt. And this daughter did not show up because she felt warmly toward her mother. She showed up every other weekend driving hundreds of miles because she felt that it was the right thing to do. And here's what she said. She said, I would not have expected this, but all of that bitterness has just washed away. And I have let it go, and all I feel is love toward my mom. So that's a
It's amazing.
That's a sweet.
Your experience. We've talked a little bit about this in other situations where the caregiving, the modeling of the fifth commandment, the caregiving, allows for the dissolution of sometimes estrangement, and there are real spiritual opportunities. And this, because it's a major life transition, not only for the person being cared for, but for the caregiver, which is, I think, implicit in what you're saying, that these are unbelievable opportunities for your own personal spiritual growth.
Yes.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating. You go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I experienced this personally with my father, who was not the easiest guy in the world. And he was a wounded and wounding person. When he went to the nursing home with his Parkinson's and his dementia, I had this prayer that emerged in me, which was, God, let something happen to his soul. Honestly, I have no idea I didn't know what I meant, but that's what came up.
Right.
But I made a decision that I was going to try to get to know my dad and how he got to be the way he was. So I just asked him a lot of questions about what he'd experienced and what his life had been like. One time I said, well, what were your parents like when you were little? And he said they were very selfish people. I said, what do you mean? He said, you know how you love going to your kids' sports games? And how proud you are and how excited you are? He said, they would never do that. And in that moment, my dad, first of all, taught me something about his life, but he also showed me that he saw me. Something that, most people don't know about me, but my favorite thing for all the years that my kids were little was spending the afternoon at sports games and cheering my kids on. And, that wasn't about my career and it wasn't about my public persona. It's something that's very intimate and dear to me. And my dad saw that. And that was so moving to me. And I just got to see how all of the rough parts of my dad burned off. the harshness and the grumpiness and the whatever else. He was just loving and grateful. And that was a gift for him and a gift for me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, if they open their souls, because all clergy people have seen this. If they open their souls to the possibility they're going to be given gifts in this journey, those gifts come. Sometimes, as you alluded to, very unexpectedly. But this is a different stage of life that is transformative in many, many ways.
I was just going to say, we're so attached to our intellect.
Yes.
A psychiatrist named Stephen Post talks about our hypercognitive society.
Right.
Why do I think that I am my brain? There's a lot, I would hope, more to me than my brain. And, so if I can't remember what year Richard Nixon was elected president, or even maybe I can't remember who's the president of the United States now, that doesn't mean my life is meaningless.
That's right. You want to put that on the bumper sticker for November.
Actually, I have to say, when I was young and I was working in the nursing home, they would give these cognitive tests and they would say, do you know who the president of the United States is? So there's this lady, Sophie. President is Ronald Reagan. And they say, Sophie, do you know who the president of the United States is? And she goes, oh, I wish I didn't.
Sophie was ahead of her time.
Yeah.
There's another bumper sticker. I got to ask you this, because you alluded to this, and we run across this a lot. You're working with a family, and mom or dad or whoever, their loved one, is really in perhaps the last innings dealing with Alzheimer's or dementia, and they'll talk to you and say, we visit all the time. That's not really my mother anymore. And as somebody who's devoted their life to this, I'm sure you've run across this phrase. Is there a possibility, Dayle, that the soul goes to a different level of reality that we just cannot comprehend?
That's a beautiful and really deep question. I think it's entirely possible that there's a journey between worlds. And, my mom asks for her parents all the time. She's 92. They've been gone a really long time. But maybe where she's living, they're really close by. So I think part of what this demands of us, the yielding to what is being soft, being curious and compassionate, that, maybe we don't know where the person is. And who's to say that being in the shared conventional reality is all that great all the time?
Right.
Maybe being in a reality where your long gone parents are nearby is really great.
And comforting.
And comforting.
And comforting. You talked before we went and started the recording about this idea that you're talking about advancing joy. What do you mean by that?
So in the course of teaching about how we might prepare for the unwelcome experience of dementia, I often ask people to fill in these two sentences. When I have dementia, I fear ... And when I have dementia, I hope ... Well, first of all, that's already really transgressive, because who says when I have dementia? But in fact, it's really helpful. Lynn Castile Harper says this in her book too, that she insists on saying when I have dementia, as opposed to if I get dementia, because that just helps to bridge that gulf between me and a person with dementia. But in asking that question in a workshop of people who work with people who are frail elders, somebody answered, when I have dementia, I hope I get taken outside every day. And that was so striking to me, because that's something that I would want. I would want to breathe fresh air and see the trees every day. But you know what? Nobody would know that. So I got this idea. What if we could create a tool or a kind of document in which we could let people know, here are things that give me pleasure. Here's how I feel about nature. Here's how I feel about touch. Here's how I feel about social contact. I'm more introverted. I prefer to have some time to regenerate alone. I'm more social. I really want to be around other people. Here's how I feel about food, my favorites, my least favorites. Here's how I feel about music. This is music I would really love to hear, and don't you dare play this. So I created this little tool called Advancing Joy. And I am happy to share it with anybody who's interested in it. At the moment, it's a Google Doc. And the idea is, I really believe that what we should be doing in terms of thinking about care for people with dementia is fostering as much joy and pleasure as possible that is relevant and appropriate for that person. Now, we don't always know, what I think I might enjoy, of course, might not be, but it's the best indicator I could have. So I really love the idea of imagining and planning for pleasure.
No, so and if somebody wants to access this, again, the website to touch base with you is what, Dayle?
www.growingolder.net. They can click contact. And I don't think that Advancing Joy is on the website yet, but I can make it available.
All right. So before we run out of time, and again, I want to thank you again for sharing your soul and your journey with us. What concise rabbinic piece of advice would you give somebody who may be listening or watching this, who's about to enter this, what I call this tunnel, the caregiving tunnel, and perhaps is feeling overwhelmed, totally overwhelmed with how I'm going to handle this? What's the best piece of advice you could give those people?
I think look for moments of joy, hopefully with the person you're caring for, and also away from them, because that's fuel. And we all need that fuel to be able to propel ourselves on this path.
Rabbi Dayle Friedman, as usual, thank you very much for sharing some of your soul with us, and continued good luck. Stay safe, stay healthy, to the family, to your husband, to your daughter in Israel, Hatzlacha. And I will see you hopefully soon, somewhere in Philadelphia. I owe you a lunch. So
it's been an honor. Thank you so much, Rabbi Address.
No, Richard, Rabbi. We've known each other. We've known each other for a few years. So, but thank you, Rabbi Friedman. You just take care of yourself. Feel better. Stay safe. Okay. And thanks, Dayle. To all of you, thank you very, very much for joining us on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. If you have any comments or questions or suggestions, please feel free to email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. If you'd like to help support our work, go to the website, jewishsacredaging.com. You'll find a conveniently located donate button. Just click on that. Follow the prompts. It's really, really easy. And we thank you. For those of you who are involved in an organization or a company, if you'd like to sponsor a series of these podcasts that reach our audience, again, just email me. We'll take it from there. Seekers of Meaning is produced at the Broadcast Center of Lubetkin Media in beautiful Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and a shout out to our tech guru, Steve Lubetkin. Thank you very much again for joining us on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning. Again, I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address, and until we see each other again, please stay safe. And most of all, in today's world, just be kind to one another. Shalom. Thank you very much.